Well, welcome back to After 21, everybody. Via, who do we have on today?
Today, I'm very excited to introduce one of my dear, dear friends, Roshni. She is joining us to talk through mental health, and she has been a great role model, as well as just a kind of person to talk to about mental health. She's always been very transparent with where she's at with her journey, and has always wanted to help people on their journey. So, Roshni, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Roshni. I just moved to Colorado, and I am really excited to talk about mental health today. It is something that is pretty close to my heart. I never really knew the impacts of mental health until the pandemic really hit and helped me really think through and had that epiphany really that mental health is truly affecting me and the way I operate in my day-to-day. And so excited to chat with all of you about that and how you can all mitigate or alleviate some of the mental health stress that you might be experiencing.
I feel like the pandemic is kind of transformative for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody has, at least in the past 2 years, questioned their existence over the past 20 something years, at least.
Oh, yeah.
I would like to know, this is like a very businessy term, but like in terms of like therapists, like what's the sales increase since the pandemic?
Oh my gosh, probably like 20, 30, 50, 100x. I don't even know. I had always been talking about going to therapy prior to the pandemic, but I had never felt more desperate to find one when I really felt it internally that I needed one. And at that time, they're so high in demand. There's so many that you can look for. It's almost like dating, but trying to find a therapist. And so it's like, which one is the best fit for you and is going to be able to like, talk through those problems with you? Are they of the same gender or race? Like, does that matter to you? So it was quite the process to even find a therapist in the pandemic when you really felt like you needed one. So it was, yeah.
I remember like back when I moved to a new city, so Portland, and you've moved to Colorado now, so you understand this. Moving to a new city is so daunting for like just anybody in their lives, but especially when you're 20 something years old. I remember I was like looking through therapists online, and each of them costed a bomb per hour, and your insurance sometimes covers it, sometimes it does not. And it's just like, how do people do this? How do people like getting to even tell yourself that you need therapy is one thing, and then affording a therapist is the other?
I know. It's crazy. Like at the company that I work for, we used to not have, our insurance did not cover anything other than like typical health insurance, like dental, health, eye, vision, all that stuff. But since the pandemic, we now have like mental health days that we can take off. We have wellness days. We have like a wellness reimbursement that we can use for the Calm app and things like that. And I think we are able to now expense our psychology or our psych sessions if we go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So it's good to see the corporate world kind of moving in that direction, but not everyone has a job like that where they can rely on their corporate job to kind of fund some of those additional things that are just good for your mental health. And it blows my mind because we talk so much about physical health, but I think mental health is equally as important. Like going to a therapist is a checkup for your mind. I think people forget that that is totally normal and something that you should be doing, even if you're feeling okay. It's just having that conversation with somebody and being able to make sure that you're viewing and tackling life in a way that's healthy. You might not even know some of the bad habits you have or anything like that until you go to a therapist. And so I still recommend it, even if you're not feeling that anxiety or depression, but I think that's still something that we're moving towards and people are still getting the hang of and figuring out is important to them.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think it's really interesting that you brought up the company aspect of it, because it kind of goes into what we talked about in our career podcast when I was figuring out whether or not to take my job. And we're talking about negotiations and how as you get older, they change. And as soon as you said that, it was kind of like, I feel like that's something that you also want to like negotiate or talk through. Like you get your sick days, but what if you need a mental health day? What if you need, like, is there payment for like therapy or things kind of like that to make sure that your mind is working okay? I don't think that's something that people thought of like even 2-3 years ago.
Yeah. And I definitely think that it's a common term, especially in corporate, but we're like in the war for talent. So as people are trying to evaluate new jobs, or new jobs come their way via LinkedIn or email or whatever way you're getting new jobs, those are questions. People care more about their mental health now, and work from home flexibility to be able to spend time with the people that matter. Not that people from work don't matter, because a lot of my best friends come from work, but it's like your priorities shift, especially as you get older. I'm 28. The things I care about are so much different than when I was 22. And when I was 22, I definitely did not put my mental health as a priority. So, but at this time, it's like the next company, like, would I want them to be able to have a wellness fund, or would I want them to be able to reimburse my sessions? Definitely. And I hope that that is something that all companies are considering as we move out of this pandemic.
A lot of our listeners stem from 21 to say 30, 32, and they're all either starting off on their journeys or just like us, kind of establishing themselves. We are curious to know kind of, how did you kickstart your mental health journey?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be honest, y'all. I think I have always had anxiety. It just wasn't spoken as such. I remember like in high school, college, I would have like intense anxiety, panic attacks regarding tests or competitions or scholarships or what have you. And I don't think I put two and two together that that was anxiety. Like it felt like it was like the extreme side of nervousness. And I just thought that that was normal, and that maybe other people felt that. And it's not something that I really talked about. Our parents definitely didn't bring it up because, whatever
Parents
they
don't know what mental health is.
Yeah, I think they also think like if they feel that way, it's normal, but it's not. And so as I was going through college, I think I felt a little bit more free-spirited because I didn't have the pressures of being a doctor, engineer, whatever. I kind of had the opportunity to take the classes that I wanted to take and forge my own path, which is a huge privilege being South Asian. I think I'm very grateful to my parents for, allowing me to go in that path and, kind of figure it out. I think when I really started to feel it was when I joined my corporate job. My first corporate job actually had a stack rank from 1 to 50, and everybody could see it, like across the company, like where you stood in that role. And the role was integral to the company. And so I think those like things that I started to like, the things that we had been told when we were growing up about comparing yourself to others and, be the best and, all those things, it resurfaced. And I had heavy stress, and I felt that I needed to be the best in this role, but only because other people could see it, not because I truly felt internally that I needed to. And, looking back, that is such an unhealthy way to view your corporate job. Like you want to be the best at it because you want to be really good in that particular vertical or industry or whatever. But for me, I was like, I need to be the best so that other people can see it and think that I'm amazing. And that kind of kept going until the pandemic. And I was like at a crossroads in my career where I wanted to move from strategy to marketing. But at the time I felt that I really needed this promotion at work to get there. And I was so stressed. It was all consuming. Ria, if you had known me at the time, it was bad for my friends. Like I talked about it nonstop, could not sleep, could not eat. I lost a ton of weight over this one promotion. And then I got it. And then it felt like the people around me were kind of irritated, and they were like, we knew you were going to get it, blah, blah, blah. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, I have such poor habits when it comes to, reframing and affirming and believing in myself. I'm always comparing myself to others. And so with the help of a friend, actually, we went on Psychology Today, and we looked at therapists, and you can like filter by anything, like the issue that you're facing, the type of therapist you want, the health insurance that you have, and it'll pull up like a list of therapists that you can work with. And I kid you not, that first meeting with Deb, I loved her. She was amazing. Like immediately jumped in, started teaching me affirmations, how to reframe, like if there's negative thought, reframe it with the positive. And in that time frame, I also experienced a breakup. So in all of that, I was just like, it was the worst of the worst. And so I really had to get out of the dumps of like, I'm lovable, I'm good, and I'm good at my job, and I'm confident, and I don't need to be stressing about all of these external factors all the time, because it's clear that I got to where I am because I'm good, and because I'm friendly, and because people like me. And I don't need to be stressed about people liking me. If they don't, they don't. If they do, they do. And I mean, it took about like 7 or 8 sessions to get me to feel really confident, but I felt that my therapist was just always there. And then Qualtrics, which is the company I work for, had like an online BetterHelp connection. So we were able to also chat with a therapist if needed. So I kind of had 2 therapists for a while, which is not recommended, but because Qualtrics had this offering, if I felt like I couldn't reach my therapist and I needed to just chat about something, I would chat my other therapist just via the BetterHelp app. And so I don't know, I think it was really the pandemic that culminated all of the things that I had learned from childhood, but it took like 26 years for me to get there. So I truly recommend people just, taking care of it, because I for sure didn't. And I can only imagine the impacts of what would have happened had I taken care of it at a younger age.
So one of the things you said that I found really interesting was how it kind of got amplified as soon as you joined the corporate world.
Yeah.
And that is something that I actually think we hear, or maybe don't hear, but like no one really talks about it. But you see a kind of resurgence of my mental health is struggling a little bit once people graduate college and enter the corporate world for like multiple different cases. But can you talk a little bit more about maybe like what you think could just be an instigator for that? I know you mentioned your specific situation, but it kind of other than that.
Yeah, also regarding like other mental health instigators, I do think that social media is a huge one that I think that we didn't really experience when we were, I don't know, especially for me, I'm kind of in that middle ground generation where social media was not a thing for me in high school or college, really. It started post-college, right? So I think for me, for a lot of people who are now younger than me, social media is probably a pretty big influence, because you see people, kickstarting their careers, or, being entrepreneurs, or, showcasing their fashion, or some, whatever they are, interested in. And when you feel like you haven't reached the same potential as them, or you feel like your pictures or your reels or your videos or your Instagram TV, it doesn't perform in the same way, you automatically feel down on yourself. And I feel like that can create a ton of anxiety and depression that we wouldn't necessarily have to feel if we didn't have the constant stimulation. So I think that's one huge trigger. I do think that the way that we were raised, particularly as South Asians, and this is nothing against our parents because they're wonderful, amazing people, but the subtle comparing to others, feeling, your parents bringing up some other auntie's kid, and you just kind of feeling like it doesn't, to them, they're not really trying to say it in a way that's negative, but to you, it just feels like an internal stress of, oh, I need to be the best, always, forever, always on. And so I think those 2 triggers for me personally have been things that I've noticed have amplified my mental health, but I am for sure certain that people of the same descent as us, or even people who are actively on social media trying to navigate the space and look a certain way or be a certain way, I think that is like the biggest trigger of our generation now, which is sad. It's a great way to showcase a lot of things, but it's also on the back end kind of harmful when you think about it.
You know what? I think you bring up 2 really good points that I want to break it apart, but just to backtrack a little bit, the high performing piece with living in South Asian families is a big part. I think all 3 of us can nod in commonality, because I'm sure at some point we've all faced that kid who's gotten to Stanford and you got into Drexel, what the heck? Or like, something I feel like most of us, because we've dealt with so much of high pressure from our parents, I've seen it translate in my personal life as well as I've moved and gotten older, and I've seen how I perform in any job. I'm just like you, Roshni, putting pressure on myself all the time, being like, I have to do this job great. But, what do you think is something you can do as an individual to kind of combat this high performing pressure?
I think this is going to sound kind of cliche, but this has helped me a lot. And I think it's kind of accepting that failure is okay and actually beneficial to your growth and success. We're not taught that. We're not taught that making mistakes is okay. We're taught that you have to be the best, and no failure or any type of failure is kind of not tolerated, or you need to really like figure out or wonder why you failed. When in reality, it's like not a negative thing to wonder why you failed. It's like a positive thing to actually go and think about the areas where you could improve for next time and be even better for next time. And I think that has definitely helped me, like in situations where, I've never hosted an event before or something, or I've never ran a campaign, or, I'm one-on-one with the customer and I'm so nervous that they will hate me or think the conversation is stupid or will think that I'm incompetent. But in reality, even if they do come out thinking that way, one, it's okay because now I know how to handle those conversations for next time. And two, I did my best. And the way that I feel coming out of that is more important than the way that person feels. And so I think kind of like changing the mindset of like, you're doing the best that you can. If someone else doesn't appreciate or respect that, that's not on you. So why are we constantly taking that burden and feeling like it's our fault and that we suck or we're terrible? It's not like that. And I think reframing is something that really helped me in therapy. And I do that now too. So it's like, even if something goes awry, I know long-term it's going to be okay. And it's not always a reflection of me. And if it is, I need to go and work on that. And that's not anybody's fault. And it's not my fault either.
As we're talking about a lot of the environments that we grew up in, one thing I've noticed is positive affirmations isn't something that comes natural to the South Asian community. And it's no one's fault, it just doesn't, right? So like we're saying, we all grew up hearing a constant comparison, whether purposeful or not, so we do that ourselves. But recently I have realized that I see an interesting difference between my South Asian friends of our generation and non-South Asian friends. And what I notice is the non-South Asian friends are very positive affirming. It's like without being asked, without saying anything, it's just from observation. Like I was in a car ride we had a 5-hour drive to a friend's birthday, and I was in the car with 2 girls, and I took a tax call because I needed help with my taxes, and it was taxes for business, and I was frustrated. I was like, oh my God, and I felt so bad. It was so boring, a tax call that my 2 friends sat and listened to. And I got off the phone, and one of my friends goes, Ria, I just have to tell you, I'm so proud of you. And I was like, what?
I'm so proud of you doesn't exist in our dictionary.
Yeah, I like now in this conversation, I'm thinking about it, but like I did compare and contrast a little bit when I came home that weekend, being like, I feel so good about myself. This is like a rare thing, but I'm wondering, like, as you and your friends are a little bit like older and you guys how have you seen that shift? Like, do you see positive affirmations from South Asians as well as we get older? Do you think there's a change as people start to go through therapy, or what?
I definitely feel as we get older, we start to care less about, other things and focus more on ourselves and, just affirming. And so I think in my friend group specifically, we're so supportive of each other. I think that's a huge part of just having a good, safe space for your mental health too, is having a support system like that. I've definitely seen the shift with my friends, just us being more positive about the things that we do, even when it's hard. A lot of them are doctors. So being able to like come into the group chat and talk about those things and know that your other group of friends are going to be able to share and make sure that you feel okay and that you're amazing for doing this crazy thing because you work so many hours. So I think it's definitely shifted on the South Asian side. Even from a parent side, I think it's shifted, right? Like my brother and I definitely have experienced mental health issues, and it was a shock for my parents. But my dad specifically has always been super open-minded, and it was really hard for him. But I feel very lucky to have someone like that where we can just have those open conversations, even if we don't necessarily meet eye to eye. As you grow older, you kind of feel more comfortable having those conversations with South Asian parents. Whereas when you're younger, you're kind of dependent on them more. And so you feel kind of nervous having those conversations. Whereas now it's like, I make my own money, I live on my own. I feel more comfortable having these conversations with you and hoping that you'll understand and, make that safe space at home for me and my brother. And I think they've definitely kind of gotten that message, particularly my dad, who's always just been really open-minded. I think my mom took a little bit longer to come around, but I think she just knows that she wants to make us feel better. And so there's definitely been a more affirmation on the job side, particularly when I started a job that was kind of low paying at first and I wasn't a doctor. I think my mom has definitely come around to that and has been able to, tell people and tell me, hey, like, you're really good at your job. I'm proud of you. And I hadn't heard that for like the 7 years that I had been working. So I think just being older, you're just more apt to having those conversations than you were when you were younger. So I definitely have seen the shift, and I like that a lot. And I hope it continues to grow and get better.
You know, it's so refreshing to hear Indian parents or your friends just say, good job. You did great, sweetie. Like, I'm so proud of you. Kind of going off of the train of thought that you just brought up with conversations. I have a lot of friends now in India. I've moved back home, and folks here are they are opening up. They are, getting used to the idea of therapy, getting used to the idea of mental health, but there's still, it's kind of like a gray area, kind of bringing it up with your friends, calling your friends out if they're being ignorant, or calling your parents out if they're being, completely unaware. How do you, do you think there are any tips you can give us when we initiate these conversations with either friends or family? Because those are our core group per se.
Yeah, it's definitely, I'm sure it's even harder out there. Because as you know, in America, I think it's definitely more of a conversation that we can have versus I think the other countries are still trying to figure out what the best way is to navigate therapy and mental health. Yeah. And it's hard. It's definitely not an easy conversation to have by any means with anybody. But I've definitely noticed that being vulnerable helps me mentally, just like being able to open up. I personally feel better having shared that. I don't think it's a burden to share that with somebody else, but I personally just feel better. And so I don't know, there's so many self-help books too that I think could be a good way to ease the conversation. Like when I brought it up with my parents, it was after reading this book by Glennon Doyle, which is totally slipping my mind.
Untamed.
Right now. Yes.
Oh my God, that book's a Bible. I love it.
Affirma gave it to me for my birthday 2 years ago.
Did you read that, Ria?
I'm halfway through.
Yeah, well, shockingly, that book, it talks a lot about what I said, which is that like it's okay, like feel your feelings, be able to, own them and, move forward with them. And I really enjoyed that book. And so, I was at home actually when I was going through my mental health issues. My severe mental health issues, I was actually at home in Michigan living with my parents. I had also experienced a breakup. And so, some of my friends were sending me these books, and my parents picked up, they like found the book, they looked at it and they were like, what is this for? And I found that as an opportunity to be like, look, I'm reading these self-help books because I'm kind of feeling a little bit down in my mental health. And I know to y'all, that's not something that you've experienced before. And it's not something that you really might be able to relate to, but like, I'm feeling more than sad, and I'm feeling more than just nervous. And we can talk about it when y'all are ready. But I just want to let you know that like these books are helping me kind of go through this. And when you want to chat about it, we can chat about it, but know that like things are not okay. And I don't want us to like be living under this roof thinking that things are okay. And I kind of just left it at that. And then eventually I feel like that, Indian parents are like kind of in your face. Like they want to know what's going on. So like having that conversation allowed us to take baby steps towards a bigger conversation, which is like, yes, I do have pretty bad anxiety, of severe anxiety. And I don't know how to handle it all the time. And I just need to be in a safe space and need you all to respect that. And not every Indian parent's going to understand. So I'm certain that like people might bring this up and your parents might be like, what the heck are you talking about? And I think it's just like having that mental tenacity to be like, okay, we'll have these really small conversations, we'll get there. But for now, like bringing it up via self-help book or via something you saw on social media, I think is a good gateway to having those conversations. And then just slowly taking those baby steps to say, hey, I know I brought this up, would like to chat with you when you're ready. Because I think it's kind of weird, like we're the ones who are having the issue, but we kind of have to like broker that conversation with our parents.
Super careful. Yeah,
it's added stress to the mental health. It's like, oh my gosh, now I have to do this. But I think long-term, whether it takes like a few months or a year or 2 years, I think that having and brokering those conversations in a small way will help. And I don't know if that's helpful advice, but for me and some of the people I know who have had struggles, opening up to their parents about it, they have brought it up in those external ways first, and then talking about what you're actually facing.
I have a quick kind of question based off of that. So mental health is often viewed as weak in the South Asian society. And I think that is one of the things that people really struggle with in terms of telling their parents is like, they don't want to be considered weak. How would you say, or what tips would you give to approach that kind of conversation when it's a very negative or weak like connotation?
I think this is a huge struggle because I think because we're afraid of being seen as weak, we also feel that we're weak. So it's just like a very fine line to walk. And I personally have experienced this. Like I felt incredibly weak and scared just in general. Not even in the face of like sharing it with my parents. I just felt weak, that I had been so debilitated by my mental health that I hadn't found the right amount of help, and I was in this state. I think it just goes back to what I was saying. And this is a very, very hard thing to do. And mind you, it took me like 2, 3, 4 months to actually get this in my brain. But I think it goes back to like, mental health is normal, and feeling this way is normal. We have a lot more pressure. We have a lot more social media. We have all of these external factors that are impacting our mental health. And it's okay to feel like you're not doing as well as others, or that you're failing or making mistakes. And I think in having those conversations with your parents, like they are, the figureheads, they're your parents. You want them to respect and always, understand where you're coming from. But I think the reality is recognizing that they might not, and that it doesn't affect you as the individual. And the best thing I can do for myself is like continue to make myself feel better through these different avenues, whether it's therapy or reading a self-help book or affirming or reframing or whatever, gratitude exercises, journaling. There's so much to do. And I think when they come around, they may come around if you want to keep having those conversations. I think it's, you have to have that mental strength to like have those conversations with them, especially when it comes off as being weak. But I think the best thing you can do for yourself is focus on you. And I think we've, from our entire lives, have been taught to focus on others and how they impact you.
Preach, sister.
Yeah. So it's hard. It's like you have to unlearn all of these toxic things you learned growing up for 24, 25, 26 years. Like that is really hard. So when I say this, I know it's not like a one size fits all approach. Like I know that what I'm saying may sound super simple, but like it's not. It took me 4 or 5 months to figure that out. It took me like 8 or 9 therapy sessions to figure out how to feel comfortable being okay that I have a mental health issue. And that is the best advice I think I could give. It comes from within.
And this is more of like, I guess, just an overall discussion topic within the three of us. But Roshni and I talk about this all the time. We're both the older child in a South Asian household. And of course, everyone who does not know is the younger one. I want to talk about kind of how that in some capacity affects mental health and how everyone has dealt with it.
I truly feel this in my soul. Being the older child is difficult than I thought it would be. I mean, I didn't ask to be born first, however, it has happened. And so I think for me, it's just interesting because the first child is supposed to be obedient, is supposed to like listen to their elders, is supposed to follow the rules and be this role model for the younger child. But I've always been quite the mischievous person. Like I've always been a little bit rambunctious. I have pushed back even from a young age. And that's definitely been tough on my parents, So I think that constant, I never really got validation that I wanted from a young age. So I always felt I was inadequate. I couldn't understand why. When my brother was born, he's the exact opposite. And to this day, he really is like the perfect child. Like he is very calm and collected, super kind. He's gonna be a doctor. He's in residency right now.
Star.
He is the star, And I felt like, on top of not being the expectation that I was supposed to be as the first child, I also had the younger sibling just completely outshine me in every way. He was so kind. He never made me feel a type of way, but like my parents would always be like, why can't you be like kind like this person, or why can't you be smart like this person? And it was hard having to deal with that because it's not either person's fault that we turned out this way. We just are.
You brought up also like expectations, because I think very similarly, like I think there's a lot of unspoken expectation that no one like talks about. Like I always felt like I had to do things a certain way, or like a certain level of success or whatever it was, because it like sets the tone for the younger one. Because if you mess up or do something the wrong way, if the younger one does something differently, it ends up linking to you. I like how you said you kind of still were like rambunctious and like spoke out or whatever, because that's the main difference I see between me and my sister, is because I'm the older one, I just will quietly be like, whatever, don't say anything. Like, I've trained myself very much to be like, don't say anything. And sometimes I'll tell her like, why are you poking the bear? And she'll be like, no, because I want to stand up for myself and do this or do that. But it's like a level of freedom that she feels that I never felt subconsciously I had, because I was the older one who needed to just keep things simple, or like, she existed, so I shouldn't be a bother.
Yeah, I do feel like we've kind of, in a way, you know, by being just, I don't know, by going through all of those, we've kind of given an opening for the younger sibling to kind of experience life in the way that they should. It's just hard because we're compared to them. And the expectation is still that we're kind of like prim and proper, and that we, you know, go through life without rebelling and things like that. So I totally relate to that. And it's no one's fault, which is the worst part. Like, it's not your fault that you were born second. Like,
I feel outnumbered right now and I feel attacked, but
it's not your fault though.
No. I do like have to say, it's hard enough being born in a South Asian family, and then if you're the first child, then like, God bless you, like, it's quite hard.
Yeah.
Because I'm that sibling, and Ria knows this already. Like, I'm like, I always say this, I'm the Dia in my family. So opinionated and, you know, just lousily loud. And I'm like, I'm going to do what I want to do in my life, and you could go suck it. That's the kind of person I am. But I've grown to understand. I think the only thing I've recognized as a second child over the years is just kind of, I feel for my brother for sure, but he's paved the way so well for me in terms of just being that responsible older sibling. I can't ever empathize with what he went through, but the one thing I can say is I'm very fortunate to have him as an older sibling, because he's the responsible one, and I've learned so much watching him. So like, even though I've caused him a lot of temporary pain, I think, isn't that the biggest gift, like, as an older sibling, that you want your younger sibling to respect you? So
oh my gosh, well, that's sweet.
I've spoken a lot about how to have these conversations with someone else if we are vulnerable at any stage in our lives, but I want to flip the switch a bit and ask you as to how you would approach someone who's come to you for help. So what do you say to them if they are vulnerable, or they're trying to tell you that they are seeing some signs and you just have no idea, you've never been through this? What do you expect as someone who's seeking help, and what do you expect from someone who you're going to seek help from? You know what I mean?
This is a great question. I think the most important thing is to validate, to say, I understand how you feel, or like, even if you don't, just being like, how you feel is valid. The way you're experiencing life, or the certain pressures you're facing, how you feel is valid, even if I don't relate to it, or I'm not going through it myself, knowing that, you know, it's valid and that you're there for them. Because I think the biggest thing is, a lot of people go through mental health issues and they don't have a strong support system. So just knowing that, like, they can chat you or call you or text you when they want, or when they feel they need to, I think is super important to acknowledge and let them know. I certainly have had experiences, particularly honestly with my ex-boyfriend, where I was kind of sharing some of my mental health issues and it did not get validated. And it was kind of like, hey, that's in your head, or like, it's not that big of a deal. And saying those kinds of things are so horrible. And so I just think it's important to, you know, make sure that, like, you respect what the other person is saying, even if you don't 100% relate to it. And I've definitely had people come to me. I had a friend just recently come to me talking to me about depression, which I personally have not faced to like a severe degree. And I think just knowing that they can contact me, or, you know, that I'm always going to be there. I actually had someone who was very close to me experience suicidal thoughts. I had no idea. They never told me that, but they would call and text me and kind of share some of the problems that they were facing at school, or, you know, when they felt alone. And I've never experienced that, but it sounds so painful and hard. And the best I can do is just let them know that I'm going to be there. Like if you call me, I'm picking up the phone. If you text me, I'm texting you back. And funny enough, that person, I guess it's not funny enough, but like that same person came back to me like 6 months later and was like, you saved my life by just picking up the phone and by texting me when I asked. And I just think that's so important. Like validating and understanding and just being there has immense effects on mental health. And I know, again, that sounds kind of easy. It seems like, all of us are, really friendly and would want to be there, but like, it is surprisingly hard having experienced it, who will actually stay and listen and be there for you and who will walk away because they think it's too much of a burden. It happens. You can lose people over it. And I just think that is the most important thing, to just not dismiss someone. And I know, again, like it sounds easy for us, but like it is crazy how hard that is for people to do.
I think also one thing I want to add, literally, because Roshni and I were just talking about this, but like you also have to, as a person, recognize that it took that person a lot of courage and self-awareness before they came to you. Like they had to admit whatever was going on to themselves and then validate their own feelings to themselves to feel comfortable enough to tell another person.
Yeah, I actually learned this at a fairly young age, but when I was in college, I actually worked at a crisis hotline. So I was like 17, I was the youngest one there. Everyone else was like 25, 26, 30 plus, but I somehow maneuvered my way into this crisis hotline. So from a very young age, I'm learning that like adolescents in the age of like 8 to 20 or 8 to 18 are calling in with these issues. And like the fact that they had that intrinsic motivation to call, you just have to be there for them on the phone. And a lot of it was like, we couldn't really have a conversation because I don't know them personally, but a lot of it was like empathizing, sympathizing, validating, understanding, letting them know that they're not alone and they can always call us. And that has definitely maintained true throughout life. I mean, it's been 10 years now since I did that. But even for friends, I mean, that is the most important thing to do. And that's what we were taught at the crisis hotline to do to people that are like scared to come out or like are being abused or are gonna, commit suicide. And so I think taking those skills with you throughout life is so important. As you will meet people who are experiencing mental health issues, same as you or even worse. Mm-hmm. And so the best that you can do is just be there and listen, because as Drea said, it takes a lot of strength and courage to have that conversation with somebody, even if it's a stranger, like on a hotline, or if it's your friend.
That was very well said. Yeah. So last thing, because I know we're wrapping up, but wanted to kind of ask you, like, how are you doing now? I think Apoorva kind of mentioned, you moved to a new city and that's often mentally taxing. So how do you feel now? I know you moved, for anyone who's listening, she's moved to a few different cities throughout her youth, but now she's in her later 20s and has moved.
Yeah, this is a good question. And I think throughout this conversation, I wanted to make it kind of clear that like, I don't have it all figured out. In fact, this move has kind of opened up some of the anxieties that I had felt in the pandemic, which I don't know. I had thought that I had like solved this through therapy. The truth is, I have not solved this through therapy. I am like actively searching for a new therapist in Colorado since I can't leverage the therapist I had in Texas, who I adored. But it's been a lot harder. Like as Rhea said, when I was in my early 20s, I moved all over the place. I moved from Michigan to Salt Lake City, which is the most random city to have moved post-college work. I knew nobody, and I like made a life there. Like 10 months into that, they moved me to Australia, where I also knew literally nobody. And it was
Did you say Australia?
Yeah, it's Australia.
Oh my God, look at you go.
And it was terrifying. And I like cried the first like 2 weeks I was out there, because I was like, I know nobody. This seems cool, but it's not. It ended up being really awesome. But at the time I was like, what have I done? And then I moved to Dallas, where I did actually have like a support system. But like as you grow older, I think you start to realize that you want to kind of be closer to your friends and family. When I was younger, it was like, see you, bye, I'm going to move to Australia. But now it's like, I couldn't even fathom that, because I just want that closeness with friends and family. And what I've noticed being in Colorado is it's me and my boyfriend, who is, an incredible person. So I definitely have been struggling. And the ways that I've been trying to help myself is like reading more. I started journaling. I started taking wellness walks. I'm going to go back to therapy and have conversations about why I'm kind of feeling this way and how to affirm, because I think it's easier said than done to say that you can affirm something, but sometimes your therapist can give you additional exercises that you don't know about that can help aid those affirmations. So I think it's going to be good. And I'm not like feeling like full-fledged anxiety like I did in 2020, but I can see it bubbling up again. I'm like, oh no, like I need to go and take care of myself the way I did these last 2 years.
I think it's so great to hear what you said. And this is the shameless plug part where I say, guys, listen to episode 3 of After 21, where we talk about making new friends in a new city. But no, I think both Ria and I, and this comes from both bottom of our hearts, we're so grateful that you got to, share your experience with us, and you've been so open about it. And, to wrap it up, what do you think is 3 tips maybe that you can think of that can help people build their self-worth? Because we live in such a materialistic, social media filled world, right? So how do people work on building a relationship with themselves and build their self-worth?
And 3 tips that I would probably share. And again, I think this may sound a little bit redundant, but I'm going to share it anyway, because I think it's just so much more valuable than I think a lot of people expect. One is to just like write down on a notepad 5 things that you are outside of like social media and all these expectations of you. Like, I am worthy of X. I am good at X. I am confident. I am like things you are that external things may influence, and then make it your phone background. That's my first tip. That helped me so much. I had my phone background as my affirmations for literally a year. And it took me so long to kind of feel that self-worth. So I'm not saying this is like you put it and then all of a sudden you're going to magically feel better. It's a work in progress. And so that was something that really helped me. And I highly recommend affirming, even if you don't write it down, just knowing that like, if you're feeling a negative thought, immediately counter it with, hey, I'm actually confident. It's okay. Like just a simple statement like that. Yeah. My second recommendation is to reframe. So when you're like facing an issue about self-worth, which again, I think therapy definitely helped me do this. I was unable to reframe on my own. But I mean, now I can, but before when I was feeling really anxious, I couldn't. But it's just like, okay, I'm so worried I'm not going to get this promotion because what if they don't think that I'm good enough? And it's like, if I don't get this promotion, it doesn't have anything to do with me. There were, there must have been a reason for it. I did the best that I could. I am worthy of a promotion here or at a different company if I choose to leave. Just like little things like that, or like nobody will love me. It's like you have a lot of people that love you. And then lastly, read and journal. I could be better about journaling, but I kid you not, just like letting it go on paper has been incredibly therapeutic. I forgot because I had stopped for the last 2 years, and I just recently picked it up and having some of the issues that I'm facing in Colorado. And it's been so nice to just kind of write out the goals that I have and like how I'm going to achieve them, and, aspects of my life that I know I can improve to get better. And just seeing it written and knowing that I've acknowledged it and, have goals to get there has been incredible. And then
I love journaling.
Fourth tip is I highly recommend therapy, even if you're not feeling intense mental health issues. It's just a good way to kind of talk through some of the issues you may not feel comfortable talking to friends or family about, even if it's not a mental health issue. I just think it's a great way to kind of overcome some of those challenges. And again, it's not one size fits all. Like therapy may not work for some, but I think it's been really life-changing for me, and I always will plug therapy to people. So sorry, I cheated. I gave 4 tips, but those are my 4.
I love that. No, that's really, really great that you've given us so many takeaways that we can apply in our own lives in some way, shape, or form. And I love that you mentioned that it's not one size fits all, because everybody has a bundle of different problems that they face in their lives. And we just want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts to be so courageous and openly talk about your struggles and give us tips, more importantly, on how we can face our own battles. So thank you, Roshni.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to share. It's something that I hope that people don't face to the extent that I did, but if they do, I'm always here to share how you can overcome it or make small attempts to overcome it. So thank you for having me.
Of course. Everybody, we just wrapped up our guest episode for one of our guest episodes for this month. Roshni, thank you so much for spilling the tea with us. And everybody, we can't wait to see you next hump day.